Can you beat Batman Arkham Knight without takedowns? After attempting this challenge in all the other Arkham games, I've now moved on to Arkham Knight, the last game of the series. Takedowns play a huge role in the Arkham Knight gameplay system. You can instantly knock out multiple thugs in combat, silently take out armed enemies in Predator, and so much more. Without these attacks in my arsenal, the game will be extremely difficult, if not impossible. Just like the last videos, the rules for this challenge are of course very simple. I can't use any attack with the word takedown in its title, whether it be in a prompt or the skill tree. On the chance that I run into a mandatory takedown at some point in the run, I am allowed to use a takedown for the sake of progression. Every time I use a takedown, I'll add it to the takedown counter, which will be totaled up at the end of the challenge. Now, let's find out if you can beat Batman Arkham Knight without using any takedowns. After the really long intro scene, we then take control of Batman and the run begins. We have a quick chat with our buddy Jim Gordon, and then head off to save the cop. Just like in my other runs, pure punching and countering is a completely viable strategy, meaning I don't really have to worry about using takedowns in combat. So we beat up the thugs, save the cop, and then we get, you guessed it, the Batmobile. Since takedowns and the Batmobile have literally zero correlation in this game, that means the Batmobile has no significance in this run at all. Trust me, that's a huge relief, because that's practically half the game right there that I don't even have to worry about takedowns. Plus, I won't have to talk about it too much during this video either. We then save Ivy in the safe house, power up the satellite, and arrive at the first challenging part of this run, the tutorial stealth mission. God, I hate these. The first two thugs go down with ease. You can lure them out with a batarang, then use a beatdown to finish them off. The last three thugs are where the challenge comes in. We just got our new suit, and the game really wants to teach us that brand new fear takedown mechanic. First off, you can't skip these thugs. You have to take them out before continuing on with the story. And, well, that means you have to somehow get out of the grates to take these guys out. The game doesn't give us the option to just open the grate, which means there's literally no other option than to use a fear takedown. Now, you're probably thinking I could just wait for the fear takedown to end, so I don't have to use any more takedowns. But no, waiting just means the hostage gets killed and we have to restart. So the only thing we can do is chain a fear takedown on all three of these enemies. Since I got a takedown prompt every single time, that means we have to add 3 takedowns to the takedown counter. Keep in mind that this was just the tutorial. After connecting to the satellite and finding Scarecrow's location, I then headed to Ace Chemicals to confront him. Right off the bat, I ran into an outside Predator map. These are usually quite easy, but can get really tricky when you can't use takedowns. That's mainly because of how small these maps are. First off, there's not much room for you to move around. To add to this, the thugs are almost always next to each other and in groups, and since I can't use silent takedowns, it's tricky to take these thugs out safely. I put my smoke bomb to good use, and for the most part just relied on punching to take these guys out. It sure wasn't pretty, but it got the job done, meaning we can move on to saving the workers. Most of these are just combat fights filled with pretty basic enemies. That means I could purely rely on punching and countering, along with an occasional batarang, which is an extremely effective strategy that doesn't involve takedowns at all. After saving the workers, I dove deeper into Ace Chemicals and ran into a fairly large combat encounter. I handled this how Batman really would, taking all the thugs out before they even knew what hit them. All that remained between me and Scarecrow now was a stealth section. Now, this is my first real Predator room. Unlike the other games, the Batclaw can't pull enemies off ledges in this game. I had relied so much on the Batclaw in my other Arkham No Takedowns runs, but that just wasn't an option anymore. You'd think that would open up my approach to be more creative and use the other gadgets in my arsenal to their full potential, but no. Why be smart and creative when you can mindlessly throw punches? Yes, a new mechanic added to this game is being able to punch enemies while they're on the ground. Since I can't use the ground takedown, this new mechanic was definitely a good replacement option for me. So all I did was target a thug all by himself and then proceed to bash his body into the floor until he wasn't breathing anymore. Long story short, Scarecrow gets away, Barbara gets kidnapped, and I now have to go to the clock tower with Gordon to look for clues. There was a group of armed militia outside waiting for me, and little did they know they were about to be brutally murdered. My strategy of just beating the life out of everyone was great, sure, but was it the best? So I decided to combine my old strategy with explosive gel. The addition of bombs definitely did not disappoint. Anyways, I now had to track down Oracle. This involved a lot of Batmobile scanning, and yes, another Predator map somewhere along the way. I tried taking them all on at once, but that apparently wasn't going to work this time, and I instantly got overwhelmed. That meant I had to take a more stealthy approach, if you can even call this stealthy. So I had to wait for the thugs to split up, and then I could beat them up individually. Also, I have no idea what happened here, but I hit this thug with a flying kick, right? I came back later after the fight, and his body was nowhere to be found, so I would assume that I just sent a dude flying off a 10-story balcony. But, you know, he's not dead because Batman doesn't kill. Okay, so we found the Arkham Knight's secret tunnel network, which the only thing really worth mentioning here was this combat fight. I'll admit, it gave me way more trouble than it should have, but I got through it nevertheless. After that, I was on my way to Penguin's weapons cache. After meeting up with Nightwing, he gave me the Disruptor, which will definitely help with Predator sections moving forward. I then headed down to take out the enemies around the van. Batman once again shows how brutal he is by first lodging this dude's neck into a metal fence, and then by throwing another guy into a car. I followed the van back to Penguin's hideout, and were met again with another Predator map. I call it a Predator map, but really this felt more like combat than anything. I camped up on this platform and just punched every enemy that climbed up the ladders. Now we head inside. I was so worried that this prompt was going to say takedown, but thankfully it says interrogate instead. After the interrogation, I was faced with a dual combat fight with Nightwing. Once the bar to switch characters charges up fully, the only way you can switch characters in the middle of a fight is to use a dual takedown. That meant all I had to do throughout the fight was not change characters, and I was able to take out all the thugs with ease. Next up, I headed off to Stag airships to try and capture Scarecrow. Before entering Stag airships, I first picked up the remote hacking device at Wayne Tower. Once I was inside the airship, I ran into some combat and Predator encounters that were getting more difficult than before. Regardless, I absolutely killed it in combat, beating every single encounter flawlessly. As for Predator, there were two sections on the airships. The first one was really easy. I just waited at the top of this ladder and knocked out every thug when they climbed up. The second Predator room introduced the minigunner enemy, which would make things much more difficult for me. I lured a group of thugs together on one side of the room, then used a smoke bomb so I could take them out with my fists. Then I quickly made my way to the other side of the room, beat up those thugs, then took out the minigunner last. At the end of Stag airships, we confront Scarecrow. And guess what? Another takedown prompt is thrown right in my face. Again, this is another scripted scenario where you can't do anything but use a takedown. So that's one more takedown added to the counter, meaning we're already at 4. Oh yeah, and Scarecrow escapes again. He tends to do that a lot this game. Moving on, Oracle dies. We recruit Poison Ivy to Team Batman, and we're on a mission to take out the malicious defenses on Founders Island so we can start scanning for the Cloudburst. The 2 radar towers are easily destroyed, leaving just the long-range missile launcher, which is protected by a lot of armed militia. I put my gadgets to good use to take out thugs in groups, and the remaining enemies who were all split up went down via fists to the face. After taking out all the thugs, we head inside to the control room where Batman hides in the vent before being confronted by the Arkham Knight. And guess what? The only way to get out of this vent is to use a fear takedown. Trust me, I tried my best to avoid a takedown here, but there is literally nothing I could do. Yet again, it's a scripted situation where you have to use a takedown to get out of the vent and continue on with the story. Luckily though, I only have to use one takedown here. Instead of manually using a second fear takedown on the Arkham Knight, I just waited for the fear takedown to end and Batman automatically triggered the cutscene. No, this doesn't count as a takedown because I never pressed anything. So I took out the rest of the thugs in this room by almost purely punching, destroyed the missile launcher, and then headed off to this run's worst nightmare, the movie studios. Why is this area such an absolute nightmare? Because literally every single aspect of this section in the game involves takedowns. We start off with an outside Predator map with 11 enemies, including a minigunner. Luckily for me, I just unlocked the voice synthesizer. This made it really easy for me to lure thugs away from their buddies so I could take them out while they were alone, whether it be by gadgets or just punching. I took out a few thugs like that, then threw my smoke bomb at a large group of enemies to try and take them all out. I tried to punch, but I accidentally used a fear takedown. I restarted my game, and the Predator map resetted with only 6 enemies instead of 11? I have no idea, but taking out 6 enemies with all my gadgets at full charge again was a cakewalk. Now we head inside and run into a few combat fights with Robin. Again, all I have to do is not change characters in these duel fights and I'm good. After the combat fights, I was faced with a minigunner blocking my path through this hallway. Here we go again, another situation where the game takes away 90% of your moveset and forces you to follow another tutorial. You literally can't do anything except what the game wants you to do here. You can't charge the minigunner or use your gadgets, leaving grappling as your only option. Once you grapple up, you can't do anything but swing to the other gargoyles and get behind the minigunner. And yes, once you're behind him, the only thing you can do is use a takedown. Not all hope was lost though, because I still had an idea. What if I was able to make it through this hallway without triggering the cutscene? I tried using my line launcher to skip through, but Batman just jumped right off and triggered the cutscene despite my best efforts. I also tried another idea, which was throwing my smoke bomb and then triggering the cutscene immediately after. It appears that my smoke doesn't affect this minigunner in the slightest, and I got shot a bunch of times. I also tried messing around with other things in my moveset, but to be expected, nothing worked. Also, if you use a remote-controlled batarang, you can see that there isn't even a thug here, which means the minigunner seems to appear out of thin air. So, moving on, now it's the Christina Bell Predator map in the Haunted House set. This stealth section has a lot of minigunner enemies. This would be easy in a normal run, because you can just call your teammate anywhere, anytime for an instant takedown. Without that luxury, I had to take a different approach. Thankfully, the environment is very big, meaning separated enemies were easy beatdowns for me. I would place explosive gel on the floor right after taking out an enemy, so when the thug comes over to check out what happened, I would get another free kill. Between the 3 minigunners, I took out one by using the disruptor, and then the other 2 by using beatdowns. So I was able to capture Christina Bell, leaving 2 more jokers. Also, I have no idea what happened here, but it was funny. Next up is Johnny Charisma. Disarming the bombs is easy, leaving just the bomb vest he's wearing. And unfortunately, you do have to use a takedown in this scenario. I tried literally everything else in my arsenal, but all of them resulted in an automatic cutscene and restarted the mission. That means we have to add another takedown to the counter, meaning we're already at 7. The last and final Joker was Albert King. The only way to damage him is to use a dual takedown with Robin. Yes, I do know that there's an out of bounds glitch you can use to take out King without using takedowns. I have stated before that I allow minor glitches, however I've never actually used any glitches in my runs before. I've always eliminated takedowns through strategy and determination, and always played within the rules of the game. I've gone back and forth on this topic, but for now I'm going to say I can't use glitches or skips to eliminate takedowns. With that said, I was still going to try and beat him without using takedowns. I sat there for so long, just punching and punching until something happened. Something did in fact happen. Albert completely glitched out and didn't move or attack, which also meant he couldn't revive any of the other thugs. I know I was just talking about not using glitches, but this was completely unintentional. This gave me plenty of time to experiment with my moveset to see if I could damage King without using takedowns, but sadly nothing worked. I wasn't able to remove any takedowns, but I felt better knowing I had tried everything. So I had to use 5 team takedowns to finish the boss fight, which brings the counter up to 12. Bet you thought this area was over, right? I did too, but it's most certainly not. To get back to the main room, you first have to take out these enemies. That means you have to use the voice synthesizer to get the thugs to open the gate, which you can only do when you're inside of these grates. Then, Harley comes out, and guess what? The only way to get out of these grates is to use, yes, another takedown. That's now 13 takedowns, which is more than double of all my other runs combined. Now that the movie studio's nightmare is finally over, I could move on to the next section of the game, which was the Cloudburst. There was one Predator map on Stag airships, but I easily cleared it using my gadgets. Other than that, the rest of the section is pretty much all Batmobile. As I said earlier, the Batmobile has no significance in this run at all, which means I'm just gonna skip right on through to the Arkham Knight's headquarters. This section doesn't have much fighting at the beginning, it's mainly just going through a maze while trying to get to Gordon. With that said, there was one combat encounter worth mentioning. That's this area, where there's a lot of militia all gathered together, including one with a bomb vest. Now, unlike the last dude wearing explosives, this prompt only says to disarm him. I don't know if I should be mad at the inconsistency on Rocksteady's part, but I'm just glad I didn't have to use another takedown. I then cleared the rest of the thugs, and that was that. Moving through the rest of the headquarters, I didn't run into anything worth mentioning until the Arkham Knight boss fight. This is a 4-stage Predator map with the inclusion of a boss. Stage 1 was no different than a normal playthrough, you just sneak under Jason's gargoyle and grapple up. The second stage adds our militia into the fight. I was able to take out most of the enemies with my remote hacking device, then used my beatdowns to take out the remaining enemies. Then on to stage 3, which adds enemies with optic deflection armor. For the most part, I just took out enemies that were all by themselves to lure in other enemies, then would take out all those thugs with explosive gel or just by punching. Similar to stage 1, stage 4 doesn't have any militia. That means all I have to do is sneak up on Jason, then grapple onto his gargoyle, and then the fight's over. After beating Jason, Scarecrow gets away again, and my next mission is to save the data at the clock tower from the militia. By this point in the run, I was practically an expert at Predator without using takedowns. I first hacked the drone to take out 3 enemies, including the minigunner. Next, I exploded this weak wall to take out 2 more enemies. Then, I disrupted this weapons crate to take out another thug, leaving the remaining enemies to be taken out by explosive gel or punches. Also, I had a cool moment on the last thug. He somehow spotted me, but I quickly pulled out my disruptor and jammed his gun right before he could shoot me. I then glide kicked him and completely snapped his spine in half. The next section is saving GCPD from the militia, which really doesn't involve takedowns. There was some combat fights, but not any really worth mentioning, so I'm gonna skip right on to the finale of the game. Now, I was thinking the run was over at this point, and that's where I was sadly mistaken. First up is the battle with Joker in Crime Alley. I sat here for so long, fighting the swarm of Jokers, trying to avoid using takedowns. But I unfortunately found out that the only way to forward the story is to use the Joker takedowns. An infinite amount of Jokers will just keep spawning until you kill multiple Jokers. And guess what? It takes a whopping 8 takedowns to finally forward the story, which means the takedown counter is at 21 now. And we're not done yet. Later in the finale, when Batman and Joker fight head-to-head one last time, you have to use an environmental takedown to lock Joker up in the cell. After that, the game is over and the run comes to an end. Thankfully, it's finally over. That was one of the most painful challenges I've ever attempted. So it takes a massive 22 takedowns to beat Arkham Knight. Like the video if you enjoyed, subscribe if you want to see more of my Batman Arkham challenges, and of course thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.